The Spinosaurus is one of the most well-known dinosaurs in the world, and for a very unique reason. New scientific articles are constantly being released that change its form and behavior to the point where the question of what Spinosaurus looks like has become a meme among paleontology enthusiasts. But why did this happen? I'm Reisuka, the cosplaying paleontologist, and I'm going to tell you all about Spinosaurus, from the first Spinosaurus fossil to how we reached our current understanding of it, at least at the time that this video is released. This is a story that involves crime, World War II, and personal intrigue. It's a case worthy of a movie or soap opera. My channel is the only one where you can learn about all of the latest dinosaur science and news from a real-life paleontologist, me, so be sure to like and subscribe. So let's start from the beginning. What is the Spinosaurus and how is it discovered? In 1910, the Bavarian Museum in Munich sent an expedition to North Africa to collect fossils. It was led by paleontologist Freiherr Ernst Stromer von Reichenbach. This was already his third expedition to Egypt, and he had already recovered Eocene mammal fossils during his previous expeditions. So by this point, he was really a well-known paleontologist in the academic world. The expedition lasted 3 years and led to the discovery of 4 new dinosaurs: Egyptosaurus, Baryonyx, Carcharodontosaurus, and the famous Spinosaurus aegypticus. The name Spinosaurus aegypticus means lizard with high spines from Egypt. Stromer gave it this name because of its huge dorsal spines and because it was discovered in Egypt. Now, even though saurus means lizard, Spinosaurus and all other dinosaurs are not lizards. Got it? Lizards are reptiles and belong in the order Squamata along with snakes, while dinosaurs belong to an entirely different order named Archosauria. Archosaurs are an entirely different branch of reptilian evolution that includes dinosaurs as well as crocodiles and pterosaurs, which are not dinosaurs. Okay? If you're confused, just remember that dinosaur means terrible lizards because they were terrible at being lizards because they were not lizards! Okay, but if Stromer had the Spinosaurus fossil, he could just look at the bones and reconstruct the animal correctly, right? Wrong! The first fossil ever found of Spinosaurus, which in paleontology we call the holotype specimen, was not very complete. It included part of the lower jaw, 20 teeth, vertebrae from different parts of the spine, and the gastralia. These were the only bones that reached Germany for study because at the time in 1914, the First World War was raging on. As Britain and France were fighting for control of Egypt, colonial inspectors broke a lot of fossils that were being transported on ships, and the Germans were no longer welcome in the country. On top of that, Stromer's main contact in Egypt, Richard Markgraf, died of a mysterious disease in 1916. Markgraf was also the one who actually dug up Spinosaurus aegypticus. It took Stromer another 8 years to get these bones sent to Germany, and by the time they arrived in 1922, they were completely shattered from being mishandled because of the chaotic state of the world. Pretty depressing, man. Now, despite all of these difficulties, Stromer was able to study the anatomy of the fossil and recognize that it was a theropod dinosaur, but a very strange one because of its conical teeth and because of the famous big dorsal sail. When paleontologists describe an incomplete skeleton, we look for clues by comparing it to animals with similar behaviors, or we fill in the gaps with the anatomy of animals that are expected to be closely related to that animal evolutionarily. But this was the first Spinosaur that was ever discovered. So that's why in the original article describing Spinosaurus, there wasn't even an attempt at reconstruction. Only in 1936 did Stromer come up with a reconstruction that looked a lot like other theropod dinosaur reconstructions at the time, with a tail that drags on the ground and the dinosaur kind of walking somewhat upright. Even though his reconstruction is very different than the Spinosaurus that we know and love today, Stromer actually got a lot right. He predicted that Spinosaurus was the longest dinosaur that ever existed at around 49 feet long, and understood that the sail on its back wasn't a muscular hump like we see in buffalo or like an Acrocanthosaurus. In addition to getting key features of the anatomy right, Stromer had already proposed that this dinosaur was piscivorous or fish-eating because of its conical teeth, which were very similar to that of crocodiles, and us paleontologists still agree that Spinosaurus was largely piscivorous. Piscivore. It's a little hard to say. It's a little sketchy, guys. But because this holotype specimen was so fragmentary, almost every update about Spinosaurus came from the discovery of more general dinosaur knowledge, which made paleontologists revisit several dinosaurs with new technology and this new knowledge in mind. But it was already really difficult to figure out what Spinosaurus looked like from what was found, and in 1944 it became impossible for a period of time. After Stromer's expeditions, all of the fossils that he collected remained in the Bavarian Museum in Munich, Germany. And if you remember your history lessons, the time period between 1930 and 1945 was not a great time to be alive, especially in Germany. The fossils in the Bavarian Museum had survived several bombings during World War I, but in 1944, World War II was different because the Nazi Party had taken control of Germany by this point. Now, Ernst Stromer was publicly opposed to the Nazi Party, and because he had already been considered a renowned paleontologist in the 1930s and had the noble title of Freiherr, the Nazis didn't eliminate him or exile him from the country, but they did everything that they could to make his life a living hell. Stromer was invited to retire in 1937 by the government, and during World War II, his 3 sons were sent to war. 2 were killed and 1 was missing in action. Basically, they were all killed because he stood up to the Nazis and was a prominent paleontologist. So basically, they destroyed his reputation as a scientist and his family as punishment for his beliefs. And this persecution of Stromer led to the destruction of the Spinosaurus holotype specimen, sadly. In April 1944, German intelligence anticipated an attack from the Royal Air Force on the city of Munich. This led Stromer, who by then was elderly and retired, to ask the curator of the Bavarian Museum at the time, Karl Björlin, who was a young paleontologist and a supporter of the Nazi Party, to protect the fossils from the impending bombing by moving them to a safer location. This protocol had already been carried out in other museums at the time, but because Karl Björlin believed in Nazi ideology and despised Stromer for his opposition, he denied Stromer's request and believed that Germany's anti-aircraft defenses would stop the British Royal Air Force. Now, this was completely insane because it was well known at the time that the British Royal Air Force was the most powerful air force in the world, but go off. And now we don't have Spinosaurus, so on the night of April 24th, 1944, hundreds of British and American aircraft bombed Munich, and one of those bombs fell directly onto the academic hall of the Bavarian Museum, destroying all of the fossils that were collected throughout the years, throughout Ernst Stromer's entire career. Devastating not only to him as a person, but also to paleontology as a field and to the treasure trove of the world that is available to us people on Earth because of Björlin. So, one of the main reasons that Spinosaurus keeps changing, you can guess, is because of the Nazis. World War II and Karl Björlin's incompetence led to the world losing the only Spinosaurus fossil that we had at the time, not to mention the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of specimens collected over the career of Stromer. Now, all that remains of the holotype, unfortunately, are photographs and illustrations from the time, most of which were only discovered recently in the 2000s when the University of Pennsylvania recreated Stromer's journey through Egypt. They didn't discover anything new about Spinosaurus, but they did find a sealed box of Stromer's photographs from when he set up the first Spinosaurus exhibition at the Bavarian Museum. Now, without the incomplete bones of the Spinosaurus holotype or any new fossils from Stromer's original collection, all that could be done with Spinosaurus was really to speculate about what it looked like based on general dinosaur science discoveries. After all, no Spinosaurus was known at the time besides the holotype specimen, which had been destroyed. It was destroyed! Can you tell? I'm upset that it was destroyed! What changed in 1986 was the discovery of another Spinosaurid dinosaur, Baryonyx, that we all know and love today. I know you dino nuggets love your Baryonyx. This was a much more complete fossil that had several characteristics that matched the previously unique features of Spinosaurus. This included having high neural spines, though they weren't nearly as exaggerated and large as the ones in Spinosaurus, and a similarly long snout and jaw filled with conical teeth, that closely resembled those of crocodilians. At this point, Spinosaurus took on the look you probably know it by, like in Jurassic Park 3, one of my favorite reconstructions of Spinosaurus ever. I love that. I love that. Spinosaurus from Jurassic Park 3, always have, always will. Paleontologists used Baryonyx to fill in the gaps where Spinosaurus's bones were missing and added the dorsal sail from the photos of Stromer's holotype. Now, more importantly than just resembling the Spinosaurus fossil, the discovery of Baryonyx added new features that made Spinosaurus an even weirder dinosaur. The snout was very long, kind of reminiscent of animals like the gharial crocodile, with an odd shape at the tip of the snout that resembled a little spoon. Its eyes were also positioned toward the top of its skull rather than on the side, and again, this is very similar to the position of the eyes in crocodilians, which I frequently compared to Spinosaurus and Baryonyx in this video because they're well adapted to catching prey in the water and they are archosaurs. And I am not the first to do this. Many paleontologists have compared Spinosaurus and Baryonyx to crocodilians and a lot of other dinosaurs to crocodilians as well, not just these two. Even though dinosaurs are birds, they're not reptiles, yay, but it gets a little iffy sometimes. Now, all these features I've been talking about are characteristics associated with animals that primarily eat fish, again, piscivores. The elevated eyes of Baryonyx would probably have helped it see above water, even when most of its skull was submerged, and that long jaw with conical teeth was perfect for catching those fast, slippery fish with lateral movement. In addition to these features on the skull, Baryonyx has other anatomical features that indicate a fish-eating lifestyle, like the long claws on its hands, which could help it catch prey in the water, and long legs, which resemble those of animals that spend a lot of time in shallow water. So think about birds like herons, which use their long legs to kind of wade in the water and see fish and other prey animals in the water over a larger area. These features in Baryonyx helped us understand more about Spinosaurus, but it still wasn't Spinosaurus itself. These are different species, different genera even. There's a lot of evidence that despite the similarities, these two might have had many different characteristics. Baryonyx was found in England and lived from about 130 to 125 million years ago, while Spinosaurus was from Egypt and lived from between 100 and 94 million years ago. So even though they were relatives, there was a significant gap between them that allowed for the possibility of many evolutionary changes. These suspicions were confirmed with the discovery of more Spinosaurs in the late 20th century. I just had to pause the video because the plane was flying over, kind of ironic since we're talking about Spinosaurus, whose holotype got bombed out by planes, you know. It's a little shout out to original holotype, Spinosaurus aegypticus. Okay, back to Spinosaurus and Baryonyx, they're different. Now, these suspicions were confirmed with the discovery of more Spinosaurs in the late 20th century, some with sails and some other features that are very similar to Spinosaurus, like the Brazilian species Oxalia and Irritator. And then there were others that were found that had features that were more similar to Baryonyx, like Suchomimus from Nigeria and Ichthyovenator from Laos. Also, shout out Brazil. All of my editors are from Brazil. Thank you guys. Shout out to all the Brazilian paleontologists. Shout out Brazilian Spinosaurids. Woo woo! Okay, with these new fossils to compare, Spinosaurs were split into two groups, the Spinosaurinae and the Baryonychinae. As more Spinosaurs were found, filling in the gaps of the Spinosaurus holotype with Baryonyx-like features started to seem wrong. This is when we began to see reconstructions of Spinosaurs changing drastically in a short period of time. Depending on the paleontologist, the Spinosaurus could look nearly identical to other Spinosaurians, or have unique adaptations that weren't really seen like in its closest relatives. This led to the big debate that some paleontologists are still bringing up today. You know who you are. You know who you are. And it pissed me off. And it pissed a lot of us off. And the debate that off, that's really not a debate, okay, is was Spinosaurus aquatic or not? And now everyone in the public, oh, is Spinosaurus aquatic? Is it aquatic or not? Well, you'll see why this pisses me off in a second, okay? Now, this debate of whether Spinosaurus was aquatic or not developed because some Spinosaurs had developed denser bones, which is a common adaptation in aquatic animals that helps them to sink into the water. But this bone density was not consistent across all of them. So it became a mystery as to where Spinosaurus kind of fit on the spectrum of being aquatic. To this day, we still don't have definitive evidence about the behavior of Spinosaurus, and we cannot tell whether it was fully aquatic or not. So this is something that will likely continue to change for a long time. But notice I said we don't know if it's fully aquatic, fully, okay? But we do know that it was aquatic to some degree, okay? Because of anatomical features in the skeleton, and we've been over this. We've been over this. With Baryonyx and Spinosaurus, we've been over this. So stop pretending that we don't know whether it was aquatic or not, because we know it was. We just don't know the extent. What is the extent? So stop spreading that. Stop spreading that. You know who you are. Yes, I still respect you, but stop spreading that. Stop spreading that just to get a little media attention, okay? It's not cool. It's not cool, bro. Now, in addition to other Spinosaurids, some fragments of Spinosaurus were found in Morocco, confirming that the upper snout shape was indeed similar to that of Baryonyx. One of the most important finds described in 2005 was a crest between the eyes, giving Spinosaurus a unique appearance among its relatives. These fragments were important for updating our understanding of Spinosaurus, but they didn't really compare to the fossil first described by Ibrahim and colleagues in 2014. Now this is where things start to get real exciting if you love Spinosaurus. This new Spinosaurus fossil was more complete than anything we had at the time, and had new bones that weren't even present in the holotype. This fossil then became the neotype, the fossil that defines a species if the holotype is no longer in existence, basically. The neotype was quickly CT scanned so that a copy of the Spinosaurus skeleton would be preserved virtually forever, and that the tragedy of the holotype skeleton would not be repeated. The neotype has two very important novelties. It has much shorter legs than we previously thought Spinosaurus would have, and it has indications of a tail that is similar to a paddle. The authors of the paper describing the neotype proposed that both features suggest that the animal would not be well adapted to running on land, and that it had adaptations for swimming, showing that it was primarily aquatic and a quadrupedal animal. A good representation of this reconstruction of Spinosaurus is the depiction of Spinosaurus in the game Ark Survival. These new discoveries caused all of our ideas about Spinosaurus to change once again, and several reconstructions were proposed. There were models of Spinosaurus walking on its knuckles or with its palms on the ground, and there were even like semi-bipedal reconstructions of Spinosaurus, but additional studies analyzing this new evidence found that Spinosaurus was actually perfectly capable of walking bipedally despite its shortened legs, and that it was probably a shoreline hunter, according to an article published in 2022 by Fabry and colleagues. And then in May of 22, Serino and colleagues CT scanned as many Spinosaurus aegypticus fossils as possible to create a virtual reconstruction of the skeleton, and noted that some new Spinosaurus fossils were found inland instead of along a prehistoric seashore like previously. They then added internal air and muscle to create a posable virtual flesh model of Spinosaurus. They tested the Spinosaurus model and compared it to aquatic lizards, crocodiles, and mosasaurs, and found that Spinosaurus was likely a semi-aquatic bipedal ambush piscivore that fed on fish both along the coast and along inland waterways. The model shows that on land Spinosaurus was bipedal like in Jurassic Park 3, but that it was a slow surface swimmer in deep water because it likely would have been too buoyant to be able to dive. In my expert opinion, this is the most realistic reconstruction of Spinosaurus that we have to date. So for now, it seems like the real Spinosaurus was actually pretty similar to the dinosaur in Jurassic Park 3, but it just wasn't as good at swimming, and it would have had a much weaker bite force compared to T-Rex. So it would be pretty difficult for Spinosaurus to win a fight against T-Rex unless it ambushed it out of the water. And it would depend on the size of the T-Rex. Of course, every year paleontologists put out a ton of papers on Spinosaurus, so this could all change at any given time. But like I said, I believe that the reconstruction of Serino and colleagues from 2022 remains the most comprehensive and realistic for now. And that that's the entire history of Spinosaurus up until today. The coolest part of learning about this dinosaur is seeing how our understanding of science can change so drastically based on the evidence that we have. And that's really the whole point of science, to keep questioning, keep discovering, so that the next generation can discover even more, even if it means questioning and reconsidering our own findings. It's not about ego, it's about science. Comment below on which Spinosaurus reconstructions you thought were the funniest, and please like and subscribe to make sure that you don't miss out on the latest dinosaur science and news from a real paleontologist. Bye!